Hello from Victoria and me, and welcome to this evening's programme.
A baby girl is back home in Norfolk after having the right side of her brain disconnected in a drastic measure to save her life.
Little Angelina Mills had the 7-hour operation at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London.
The 13-month-old from Gresham near Holt was born with a rare brain disorder affecting just 1 in 50,000 people. Natalie Gray reports now on the tot's traumatic treatment.
Oh, bless you.
Little Angelina Mills arriving home from hospital last night.
You're right.
The operation was hugely risky, and Mum Lisa knew a happy outcome was by no means guaranteed. By this morning, Angelina was up for visitors, and our cameras the first to welcome her home.
You just put all your faith in the doctors and nurses, and your faith in the Almighty above, and with that all together, you know, our dreams have come true, and she's home.
Angelina was born with Sturge-Weber syndrome. It's a rare and incurable neurological disorder. It left her with a large port wine stained birthmark on her face, sight, hearing and mobility problems, but worst of all, seizures. In January, she had 64 fits in a month, and that's when her desperate parents knew they had to consider drastic surgery. In a 7-hour operation at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, surgeons disconnected the right side of Angelina's brain. They removed part of her temporal lobe too. Drastic may be, but it should cut her seizures by 80%.
It's hopefully put a stop to the awful syndrome, and the left hemisphere, because of her age, should be able to take over, and she should live a pretty normal life, yeah. Even better today.
Here she is recovering in hospital, but there has been a price to pay. The left side of her body will always be weak, and her left foot and hand will probably never work properly.
There are significant downsides, but in the main these children have lost most of those things anyway, and so the bargain is heavily weighted in the direction of a seizure-free life, which is what you're hoping for.
Angelina will need years of physiotherapy and eventually laser surgery to whiten the port wine stain. It's hard to believe that just a week and a day after major surgery, little Angelina is back home and doing really well, with a really bright future ahead of her. Natalie Gray, Anglia News, Gresham in Norfolk.
Which is lovely to see, and it's great to see her back home.
Yeah, brave little girl. Now, Angelina's family and friends have actually raised nearly £10,000 for Great Ormond Street Hospital.
Well, now they're hoping to raise a further £5,000. That's for a sensory room for her home, and we wish her the best of luck for that.
Yeah. Now, a man has been charged with the murder of a French chef who was killed following a classical music concert in Southend. Reynald Dechaine from South Woodham Farers died on Saturday night after an argument with a group of people following an open-air concert in Priory Park. 21-year-old Carl Wills will appear before Southend magistrates tomorrow morning, charged with his murder. A 23-year-old man has been released on bail.
Now then, in some parts of the country, this has been the driest period for more than 80 years.
Our region hasn't suffered quite as badly, but even here there are warnings about food stocks being in short supply if the hot conditions continue.
And the fire service is urging people to avoid starting fires in areas where it's extremely dry. Malcolm Robertson has more.
For most of us, it was yet another day of largely warm sunshine, hotting up nicely as the summer holidays beckon. But there's also growing concern that the increasingly dry conditions will pose real problems. In some parts of the country, this has been the driest start to a year since 1929. In East Anglia, we've actually fared rather better. The reservoirs are 80% full, which is pretty much where they should be. But even here, the period between March and June was the driest for 14 years. And if we have many more days like this, then we could be in trouble. Bob Young's already had his problems. He farms at Hockwold on the Norfolk-Suffolk border, and this crop of wheat has been ruined by the dryness, and he's having to irrigate his onions to provide him with some kind of yield.
We are all operating a global market, and there will certainly be a shortage of some East Anglian produced products if the time keeps as dry as it is now, because it's just an invariable consequence of what's going on.
Monitoring the flow of water at Brampton near Huntingdon, there's a warning that farmers and growers may have to manage with less in the future.
We're working positively with the agriculture community to ensure that we manage that water abstraction, to make sure that they get as much water as they can, and to make sure we also protect the environment as well.
Fire services around the region are urging people to be careful not to start forest or heath fires during the current dry spell.
Conditions are tinder dry out in the woodlands. We have a lot of the natural habitat in Suffolk. We have a number of events recently that have required our intervention due to fires.
For those who look after parks and gardens like these in Colchester, it means extra pressure during the working day.
We'd normally be watering probably twice a week, but with this dry spell, not so much the hot spell, but the dry spell means that we're having to water every day, and some of the staff means that they're constantly watering from dawn till dusk almost.
Tending our own gardens, there are plenty hints to help preserve water supplies.
We'd ask people to use water butts to collect water over the winter period and through a wet spring, and then they can use that water on their vegetables to keep them alive at this time of year. Likewise, if you're washing vegetables in your kitchen, for instance, don't just tip that water down the drain, bring it out, fill your watering can up with it, and then use that to water your plants, because they really are hardy enough to be able to look after themselves in these conditions if you use that kind of water.
Even on the water itself, it's been far from plain sailing. They've had to cancel rowing events in and around Peterborough because of the amount of weeds that have grown, another downside of dry conditions.
We attempt every year to clear it, and in fact we've got two weed cutting boats that we own at the rowing club. Unfortunately this year that it's grown so fast, both weed operating boats were unable to cope with the amount of weed.
More dry weather forecast for the weekend might be good news for some. Others will be looking anxiously at the sky and hoping. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News.
Well, Amanda's outside and joins us now. Amanda, many of us enjoying the sunny weather, but just how dry has it been?
Gosh, well, it has been exceptionally dry. I mean, just look at the ground here. It's desperate for a drink. So if I just show you some figures here, as Malcolm said, the rainfall in the Anglia region in the past 4 months has been the lowest for 14 years. Since March, we've had 140 millimetres of rain compared to an average of 194 millimetres. So the driest since 1996, when the rainfall was 70 millimetres, the lowest in over 100 years. Now, not only has it been very dry, it's been very hot and humid this week. Today, for example, temperatures well above average. We've had 28 degrees recorded at Norwich, 29 at Southend, and at Stanford-le-Hope, our weather correspondent recorded 30 degrees there, so very hot and humid. Now, if these temperatures are getting a bit too much for you, then you may have a welcome relief tomorrow. It does look like things will freshen up a little bit. However, still no sign of any significant rainfall, but I'll be back a bit later on with the full details on that.
Look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed. Yep, much more from Amanda later.
And lots more still to